The June paychecks arrived at 9:12 a.m. The office sounded like a cooled engine, printer size, a coffee grinder turning dark beans into sand. I slit the envelope with my thumb and folded the paper in half before I even looked. I always fold first. It gives the numbers time to confess. They'd told me 3 times it would show up next cycle. 3 cycles later, what kept showing up was a new excuse. I glanced at the corner, payroll cycle, Q2C3, and logged it in my notebook beneath a list that no longer looked like patients but an autopsy. 4 reviews, 2 HR confirmations, 1 verbal promise from my manager, Miles Carter. During a 4:30 p.m. one-on-one back in March, I slid the check into my drawer and locked it with 2707. The code is the day I started here, 07/27, 11 years ago. Back then, the fluorescent lights felt like a promise. If you showed up, the company would meet you halfway. You do the math. The math does right by you. That was before I learned how numbers could be sculpted by the words attached to them. The story of how a raise disappears is never spectacular. It's a slow subtraction. First a week, then a cycle. Then a sentence that is supposed to sound temporary but arrives like a verdict. We're under a Q2 freeze. The sentence doesn't raise its voice. It doesn't need to. It ends the conversation. I'm not the kind of man who yells in conference rooms. I don't kick chairs or slam laptops. I take notes. I timestamp. I let the facts stack themselves until gravity does the heavy lifting. It began, officially, after the Q1 review. 4.8 out of 5. Top of Operations East. Miles smiled, touched his pen to the table twice as if he were signing a check with air. You've earned this, Adrian. 6, maybe 8%. We'll call it 7. Looks clean on paper. Effective next cycle. A week later, at 10:06 a.m., Ava Grant from HR, adjustment approved. Effective next payroll. I starred it red and filed it under Pay 2025. I still have that email. It looks precise, like a small mirror. You can see your face in it if you stare long enough. Next payroll. Nothing. HR. Budget delay. You'll see it next cycle. Next cycle. Still nothing. HR. We're under a Q2 freeze. It will reflect once lifted. Meanwhile, Noah Park, my junior, 9 months in, drove a black lease into the lot. Good for him, I told myself. I had trained him, line by line, through our metrics. SLA 99.5%, time to dock 17 minutes, throughput up 12.5%. He learned the dashboard because I wrote the queries. The math didn't care whose hands carried it into the room, only whose name was spoken when the slide appeared. On Monday, Week 23, in Conference C3.17, VP Clara Monroe asked who led the inbound slot optimization. Miles lifted his chin and said, "My team did." 2 words that turn leaders into ghostwriters. I wrote them, my team, beside 942 in my notebook. Ink can be so polite while it records something indecent. That Friday at 4:55 p.m., the floor was a low-lit aquarium. Chairs like abandoned shells. Noah's pay stub lay beneath a folder. I didn't touch it. The lamp threw a quiet reflection that was enough for me to recognize the shape of the number. Higher than mine. He had a 3.9. I had a 4.8. People say not to compare yourself. Only people who have never had their math stolen say that. I shut my laptop, pulled my own pay stub from the drawer, and folded it again. 2 folds, then 4. Paper thins when you fold it. So does patience. But something else thickens. The part of you that keeps count when the room stops clapping. That night I printed 11 pages. Every promise, every timestamp, every soon. I slid them into a black binder and block-lettered a title across the front. The Invisible Raise. The binder sat on my kitchen table like a quiet bruise. My son texted to ask if I could make his next school performance. The last time I said yes, a shipment schedule moved and I spent the evening rearranging doc assignments that a different manager got praised for. I have learned not to promise what meetings can steal. On Saturday, I read the company's Pay Transparency Update, June 12, 2025. and stared at the salary band for a senior operations lead, NJ. $112,000, $142,000. My base sat below the minimum like a well-behaved secret. Then I opened Compensation Adjustment SOP V4.3 and found the sentence I needed. Any approved merit increase must reflect in the immediate next payroll. Must is a small word when you say it. In policy, it is a blade. I built the spreadsheet. Timeline, evidence. Equity. Timeline looked like a patient heart monitor. Flat line, a brief spike, then flat again. Sue 3, 28. Verbal 7% promise, miles. 402, 1006, HR approval. Effective next cycle. Forward 30. Payroll. Q2 C1. No change. 1509.41. HR. Budget delay 0530. Payroll. Sue. Q2 C2. No change 06121423. HR. Q2 freeze Dagio 628. Payroll. Q2 C3. No change. Evidence held the version logs, OPS 3D1 the delta charts. The notes from my one-on-one.equity compared my base to the band's minimum and invited an external witness. A line from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, 2024. Numbers appreciate company. On Monday at 7:59 a.m., I wrote to HR Compensation Committee and CC'd Clara. Subject, request, pay equity and adjustment compliance, Senior Ops Lead. EID 3742, 2 paragraphs, a 3-line table, and a single sentence that felt like a hinge. If the numbers are public, fairness should be 2 at 10:18. Ava replied, "We're reviewing the records. Thank you for your patience." On Wednesday, Victor Salazar from Audit asked for originals. I uploaded 11 files in 7 minutes and added nothing else. Silence is a pressure test for anyone allergic to daylight. Friday, 8:42 a.m. A scan arrived. Manager notes, merit holds. Q2 bullet MH04. Hold. Adjustment. Reallocate budget to junior analyst, Noah Park, to close compression gap. A single word, hold, and suddenly all the excuses had a spine. I forwarded it to HR, Audit, and Clara. Object. Found the missing raise. Body. Math doesn't match policy. That night, I folded my pay stub again until the paper refused me at 8 folds. I set it on the binder like a final crease in a story that would not break, only bend. I slept as if someone had moved the heavy furniture an inch back toward true. The pay equity review invite hit on Monday. Open session, 45 EG. Room A1.04. People pretend meetings are neutral. No room is neutral. Some rooms are built to look like they are telling the truth. You can see yourself reflected in the glass and still miss the person sitting across from you. 13 people. Second row for me. I don't like to sit at the front of anything. When it was my turn, I didn't bring a slide deck. I opened Excel. "I'll save us time," I said. 3 lines. On the display, my score 4.8. Trainees score 3.9. Raise 7%, misallocated. 11 seconds of quiet, and the room heard the HVAC working. Ava said, "We see the problem." Victor asked Miles if MH04 was his note. Miles called it temporary, said it was a way to retain young talent. Clara cut him off. "You don't have authority to reallocate merit." It's rare to watch a sentence land and stay. An hour later, the email arrived. Remediation plan. Compensation. Back pay for Q2C1, C3.7% adjustment effective immediately. Q3C1. Full audit of all merit holds. I replied, "Thank you. Let the numbers do their job." At 3 p.m. Friday, room C2.09, frosted glass. 2 envelopes. Ava handed me the first, back pay, and the official letter stamped with the 2 words I'd been owed for months. Effective immediately. Clara apologized. I don't need apologies, I said. I need the math to make sense again. She nodded like someone agreeing with gravity. The second envelope was administrative surgery. Miles reassigned without merit authority. Noah keeps his rate. I take Ops East rebalancing. The words did not celebrate. They simply corrected the angle of the table. Noah was waiting in the hallway, shoulders rounded. I didn't know, he said. The sentence that makes actors of us all. I know, I said. Do your job well. I didn't smile. Smiles make endings look like beginnings. The office changed key after that. People wrote fuller subject lines. CC Fields grew like winter branches. The HR board posted a notice. Pay Equity Audit. Ongoing. Someone had underlined ongoing with a thick black pen. Miles moved down a floor to procurement compliance. I passed him in the elevator once and we looked at each other's reflections instead. Noah asked if he could refactor OPS 307. Cleaner lineage. Clearer labels. His query comments were better now. Dates, owners, purpose. There is a difference between being taught and understanding. Understanding leaves a mark. One afternoon, Clara handed me a single-sheet printout titled Fair Play Posting. Ops East. Under the header, my sentence, if the numbers are public, fairness should be too. Pin this in your area, Clara said. Rules need walls. You'd be amazed what a wall can do. That weekend at 5:48 p.m., I set the newest pay stub beside the oldest. Between them lay the 18 weeks where men like me learn how not to apologize for wanting the scale level. I didn't destroy the paper. I keep proof. Not as a threat, proof as a handrail. On Monday, I taped a small note under my nameplate. Fair play rule. If the numbers are public, fairness should be too. Some people read it and nodded. Some read it and became suddenly interested in their shoelaces. A few took photos. I didn't feel vindicated. Vindicated is too loud a word. I felt aligned. I opened Ops East rebalancing and moved a lane to Dock 7. The mouse made a soft click, the smallest applause in the world. People think victory is noisy. Most victories worth keeping arrive at the volume of a second-hand meeting 12. A week later, HR scheduled a pre-audit call. Not the open session, but the kind where risk learns how it wants to be named. I listened to the vocabulary of preservation, reframe, reconstruct, contextualize. There are 1,000 ways to excuse a misallocation if you never say the word wrong. They talked about me like I was a case, which I was, but not the kind they assumed. They thought I was a story about money. I was a story about custody, who holds the math when the applause is handed out. That evening, I walked the floor after everyone left. Cubicles look like ship cabins at night. Screens sleep with their chins tilted up. I stood by Noah's desk. There was a sticky note under his keyboard. SLA 99.5% isn't a number, it's a promise. It wasn't my handwriting. It wasn't the company's. The note didn't change anything. But it explained a few things that had been waiting, patiently, to be explained. My son called to ask if I could make it to his next performance. I said yes, and then did the math that would make yes true, reschedule a dock-in, push a vendor call to Tuesday, write the summary for Clara tonight rather than tomorrow. A father is an operations model. We optimize for presence we can't get back later. By month's end, Victor sent a brief note to leadership. Preliminary audit results indicated procedural inconsistencies in the department's merit allocations. We don't use the word fault here. We use the phrase inconsistencies and pretend the room doesn't know any synonyms. Clara asked me to close the all-hands with a single sentence, no slides. It felt appropriate. I don't bring speeches to machines that run on sentences. I said the one line I trusted. I don't need apologies. I just need the math to make sense again. The room gave that polite desk tap people save for things that should have been obvious earlier. Afterward, Noah told me he'd printed the line for his team. "We're posting it next to the on-call schedule," he said, "so no one forgets where the ground is." I told him, "Good, keep it clean." He didn't apologize again. He didn't need to. I kept walking, the way you do when a thing comes to rest without falling. In the glass of C3.17, my reflection looked like a man I've been trying to be since the first time I counted trucks in a thunderstorm and knew there was a cleaner way to land them. A small thing, but it matters. I stopped folding the newest pay stub. I left it flat. Paper that you don't have to fold behaves better. You can read it from across the desk and it says the same thing it says up close. People like to call this revenge. They need a word for the story so they can put it on a shelf. I don't mind the word, I just don't use it. I used a mirror. The reflection did the rest. Every person in that room saw a different part of themselves. Some saw policy. Some saw math. Some saw a man who had spent 11 years in the wrong seat at a table that finally learned its own level. And yet, there's more to tell. The part about the town hall where Clara read the new policy in full voice. The closed door that opened when we started listing what fair would mean between managers who weren't in the room. The aftermath I carried home like a quiet bag of tools. But those deserve their own light. For now, here is the part I keep. The binder on my shelf with the invisible rays on its spine. The note on my wall with the line I won't stop believing. The silent click at Dock 7, and the way numbers once given daylight learn to stand on their own legs. I don't need anyone to be embarrassed. I don't need anyone to claim they learned a lesson. I just need the math, mine, yours, ours, to keep making sense. And when it doesn't, I know how to fold paper until it does. 3 months later, well, that's a different chapter, but if you ask me what stayed, I'd say this. I don't think fairness is a feeling. It's a geometry, and once you see the angle, you can't unsee it. The pre-audit call wasn't on the calendar like a ceremony. It arrived like an ambulance you can hear 3 blocks away before you know whose street it has turned onto. The subject line said, "Procedural Review, Preliminary Discussion," and the invite list was curated with the precision of a surgeon. Ava from HR, Victor from Audit, Clara for Leadership. 2 compliance coordinators whose job titles sounded like umbrella terms for weather you can't control, and me. I joined 3 minutes early. The conference bridge had that empty room echo where everyone breathes more quietly than they would in person, as if microphones could be offended. Someone asked if we should record. Someone else said we didn't have to, but that notes would be taken. Notes, the white gloves of corporate memory. "Thanks, everyone," Ava said. "The purpose today is to review process language and align on characterization, not what happened, what we call it." Victor spoke next, calm and unhurried, the way rivers sound when they're working downstream. "We have sufficient documentary evidence," he said. "The question is whether the reallocation was an approved mechanism or an improvised one." A small pause. Miles cleared his throat. He was on audio only, and somehow that made him feel farther away and too close at once. "It was temporary," he said. "Intended to balance compression. We're losing junior talent to the market." Victor. "There is no clause allowing a manager to divert an approved merit from one employee to another." Ava tried to soften the edges. "We may need to contextualize intent versus mechanism. We can acknowledge a good faith attempt to address salary compression while still correcting the process." Clara didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. "We'll correct the process," she said. "But we'll do it by telling the truth about it. That's the only way this becomes smaller instead of larger." Miles said nothing. The silence grew legs, walked around the room, and sat down beside each of us. Victor returned to logistics. 2 items for the record. 1, the MH04 note. 2, the conflicting timeline against SOP V4.3, which states must reflect next payroll. We wrapped at the half hour. The call ended with a soft, percussive chorus of "Thanks, everyone," like raindrops hitting different roofs. I stayed in my chair after the line disconnected, hands folded, not angry, not pleased, just aware that a river doesn't need permission to go where downhill is. On my way to refill coffee, I passed the glass wall of C317 and caught my reflection. When I was 25, I thought integrity would make everything easier. It doesn't. It makes everything clearer. Clarity is heavier than difficulty, but at least you can lift it. Flashback has a smell. Hot dust on old projectors, wax floors at 8 p.m., pizza boxes with the box grease map of who stayed late. My first manager, years ago, taught me the church of throughput. He also taught me something he didn't mean to, how people take credit in small slices, like carving a roast thin enough that everyone can pretend they didn't notice the knife. I remember a Thursday storm when I counted trucks through the downpour and knew there was a cleaner way to sequence arrivals. When the plan worked, he said, "My team did it." I didn't hate him for it. I simply started writing down who did what, not to accuse. To remember. Another memory. My son, 8 years old, dressed as a fox for a school play, eyes searching for me in the third row I wasn't sitting in. I watched a recording later, paused on the frame where he looked hopeful and moved past it like a guilty tourist. That night I promised myself I'd stop making promises to him I couldn't cash. So now I built models at night, stack-ranked trucks like dominoes. And when he asked what I did at work, I told him the truth. I helped people arrive on time. The town hall was set for a Thursday, late enough in the week for people to be tired of being brave. The auditorium was a carpeted slope with a stage that made ordinary sentences sound like announcements. Clara stood at the lectern with the new merit allocation policy printed and clipped. People took seats in clusters, managers like chess pieces that had learned to pretend they weren't on the same board. "Good morning," she began. "Today we're going to make our language match our practice." She read the policy. It wasn't dramatic. Fairness never is. It sounded like a math teacher returning to the blackboard to erase a smudge and redraw a line everyone thought was straight. When she finished, she looked up and said, "We will operate here as if numbers are witnesses. And if numbers are witnesses, they will be treated with the respect we give to truth." She gestured toward the screen. A single sentence appeared, white on dark gray. If the numbers are public, fairness should be too. No one clapped. Not at first. Then the polite desk tap rhythm began. Fingers on wood, not because we were impressed, but because we were relieved. After the meeting, a few people came over. One said, "I had a case like yours 3 years ago." Another, "I didn't fight it. I wish I had." A third, "Do you think this will change anything?" I said the only honest thing I had. It already has. Noah waited until the end, hands in his pockets, eyes tight with a kind of quiet that doesn't flinch. "I put your line on our wall," he said, next to the on-call rotations. "So nobody treats fairness as an afterthought." I nodded. "Protect it," I said. "It protects you back." There were small changes you could miss if you liked missing things. HR trimmed the euphemisms in their templates. Audit rotated their questions without rotating accountability. Managers started writing down who did what, and some of them meant it. I spent the next 6 weeks standardizing Ops East rebalancing. The work was clean. Map gate times, edit slot allocations, recalc dwell. I liked moving lanes on a screen until the distribution matched what trucks would do if they knew how not to arrive like a parade with no band. Numbers don't have pride. They have inertia. If you honor that, they honor you back. Noah became the kind of colleague you learn from. He built pre-deploy checklists and added a line at the top. Source of truth. It seems like a small question. It's a large one. We baked it into every rollout. I stopped folding the newest pay stub. Flattened, it took up more space in the drawer, but less in my head. Paper that lies flat behaves better. It doesn't pretend to be hiding. Then came an email from a name I didn't recognize. Hannah Ortiz. West Division, Operations. Subject, question equity posting. She asked if she could copy our fair play note and link to a template for tracking merits versus outcomes. "I don't want to start a fight," she wrote. "I want to start a habit." I sent her the template, and for the first time in a long while, I felt something better than relief. I felt useful. 3 months is enough time for a problem to think it has become a history. On a Monday morning, heavy with rain, Victor messaged, "Final audit complete. Would you like a copy of the summary?" I said yes. It was 13 pages and read like an archaeological report of a civilization that believed in, processed the way sailors believe in stars. It listed dates, approvals, contradictions, and a set of recommendations that made the room feel larger. Write down the rule, post the rule, let the rule be a door people can knock on. There was a paragraph near the end that wasn't about me, but might as well have been. When fairness is public, the path to it gets shorter. I forwarded the PDF to my personal email, not because I wanted leverage, because I wanted to remember that distance can be measured. That afternoon, Clara stopped by my desk. "Walk with me," she said. In A104, she leaned against the table and crossed her arms. "I want you to take on a broader brief. Standardize more than East. Build the kit, templates, posting language, timelines that map to payroll reality, not just payroll slogans." "Why me?" I asked. "Because you don't chase trophies," she said. "You move weight. And because people will believe a man who didn't shout when he had a right to." I told her I'd think about it. She smiled. "You already are. The story could end here, on an upturn like a well-designed ramp. But life doesn't respect endings. It leaves them slightly ajar." On a Wednesday evening, I walked past the stairwell and saw Miles on the landing with a cardboard box. Not the cinematic kind labeled with a name in Sharpie, just a corporate box, gray, with the company logo tucked under the flap like a watermark. He saw me, squared his shoulders, and for a second I could see the man he wanted to be confronting the man he had been. "I did what I thought was best," he said preemptively, in a voice that had been practicing alone. "I know," I said. "But best for who?" There was nothing to add that wouldn't make it worse. He nodded, not at me but at the box, and kept walking down. The sound of his shoes was ordinary. It's strange how loud ordinary can be when it's the last thing you hear. The invitation to speak to a newer cohort came from HR. Short talk, 10 minutes, lessons from the floor. I didn't bring slides. I told them what I tell myself. Write it down, date it, keep it clean, don't threaten, let the numbers carry their own weight, and if your voice shakes, let it. Courage doesn't check for tremors. It checks for receipts. Someone asked what fairness means to men in their 50s. The room got very quiet. I said, "It means you stop asking to be seen and start making sure the work is visible. It means you learn how to go home before the performance starts, not after it finishes. It means you understand that dignity is the cleanest revenge, and that revenge ends when justice begins." They thanked me. They didn't clap. I didn't want them to. That night I sat at my kitchen table with the invisible raise binder and a fresh sheet of paper. I wrote the dates down again with a kind of gratitude I didn't recognize when all this started. I wrote the names too, not to summon them back, to let them leave. There's a memory I almost never tell. A storm, years ago, where trucks lined up along a chain-link fence and I stood under a corrugated tin awning counting headlights like a loud, wet version of prayer. I was younger, I was colder, and I thought leadership sounded like a voice on a loudspeaker. Now I think it sounds like a line typed in clean font and pinned on a wall where anyone can touch it. If the numbers are public, fairness should be too. It fits on a sticky note. It holds up a building. Noah and I walked the floor last week, watching Dock 7 hum at the velocity we'd always promised it could. He asked me if I felt vindicated. "No," I said. "Just aligned," he laughed. "You're the only person I know who makes victory sound like geometry." "That's because it is," I told him. "The shortest distance between what is and what should be is a straight line called policy." He said he'd put that on the wall. I told him not to. Not every sentence wants to be framed. People will ask later what the moment was, the pivot, the crescendo, the headline. There isn't one. There's a binder on a shelf, a sentence on a wall, an email at 10:06 a.m., a score of 4.8, a number that didn't show up until it did, a boy dressed as a fox scanning a crowd for a father who learned to arrive on time. If you need a single image, use this one. A mouse click at Dock 7. So quiet and so exact that for a second you believe in the world again, not because it cheered but because it lined up. That was my story. The slow correction of an angle. Proof that dignity doesn't need to shout to win. Subscribe to the Office Revenge Diaries for more stories of clean, quiet justice. Remember, revenge ends when justice begins.